Through the chair, you're live on HCAM TV.
Hi, everybody. Somebody say something so I can get a sound check.
Hello, I can hear
Hey, Gary.
you.
There we go.
Through the chair, you're live on HCAM TV.
All right. Thanks, Bob. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see 5. All right. Good evening, everybody. It is 7 p.m. on April 22nd, 2024. This is Gary Trenzel. I hereby call our planning board meeting to order. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted via remote meeting in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body, as well as members of the public, may access this meeting via virtual meetings. Participants may access the meeting through the remote meeting link as posted on the meeting agenda and through the town's online calendar. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by raising their hand or otherwise signaling their intent to speak. This meeting will be recorded. Please take care to mute your microphone unless you have been recognized by the chair. We will now confirm attendance of members. Please respond with present if you are on the call. Rob Benson, is Rob here yet? No. Jane Moran.
Present.
Elise Michalowski.
Hello?
Hi, Elise. Matthew Ronca.
Present.
Michael King. Michael said he's not going to be here. Vikas Prati. Not here either. Parker Happ.
Present.
And Gary Trendle is here as well. All right, let's quickly take a look at our agenda. We will start with a couple of administrative items. The bond release for Hopkinton Highlands 3, which hopefully after our last meeting will be relatively straightforward. We have some guests tonight to speak to the specialized stretched energy code discussion with Sustainable Green Committee. And then we have 3 continued public hearings and 1 new public hearing for a major project site plan for the Hopkins school, lower middle school. That's a new name for me. And so let's go ahead and get started with the administrative items. And I guess just one quick comment. And I'm hopeful that, John, you haven't heard that anything from Rob, have you?
Have not. I've only heard from Vic and Michael.
Okay. I'm hoping Rob is going to be on because as an abutter to the schools, I was planning to recuse myself, and I had asked Rob to take the chair for that hearing. So hopefully he will be on shortly. All right, so let's start with those. There's Rob. Hey, Rob.
Sorry, I'm late.
Did you hear
Hi,
what I
Chair.
just said? Well, I don't know if you were on, but just a reminder that on the hearing for Hopkins School, I'm going to need you to chair that, as I will recuse myself as an abutter.
Oh, okay.
I sent you an email and didn't hear back maybe a week and a half ago, but
All right. I didn't see it, but I will. I'll be happy to.
okay. All right. So let's start with the bond release request. John, I think you had sent out an email today. I'll be honest, I haven't gone through anything in details, but what's the current status on the bond release request for Hopkinton Highlands?
So the email I sent out was just forwarding a letter from the board chair. Just basically saying we're not gonna guarantee that anything has been done properly because they just don't know. And then Marcel sent over a document that was included in the original shared folder.
Okay, so quick recap on the last meeting. We had basically said that it's a private road. So DPW didn't have any responsibility. The time that it's been installed was likely an indicator that there were no further issues, but that we were looking for the homeowners association to make a statement of some kind. And sounds like the homeowners association didn't quite do that. They just came back and said, we don't know.
Can I don't know how to raise my hand. Can I interrupt?
Hi, Brian.
Hi.
Sure.
So for the record, I'm Brian Moffett. I'm the president of the Board of Trustees here at the Mallard Woods Community Trust.
And sorry, Brian, just for the record, can you give us your address as well?
Yeah, sure. It's 4 Trevor Lane, Hopkinton, Mass. In the letter, I basically said what was presented, but I also indicated that we are unaware of any issues with the system. And we're not experts, but we've been living here for a long time and there have been no issues. And the season that we've had with an excessive amount of rainfall, the system has performed as good as we should expect, I presume.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate the additional context. Marcel, I see you're on as well. Any additional updates or consideration for us?
Not really. I gave John one of the things we were asking for was work that was done to the well. I gave him the paperwork that was showing that we had some well work done, and also a acceptance from DEP for that system at that time. That was 2010, which was after the bond letter that we were looking at.
Okay. Thanks, Marcel. Any other questions or comments from the board? We ready to take a vote on this? I think so. So let me make sure I get this worded right. I will entertain a motion of the planning board. Gosh, what's the right wording here, John? Entertain a motion of the planning board will release the bond of $146,400.
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Elise?
I don't think I can vote because I haven't filled up a form from the last meeting yet.
This isn't a hearing through the chair. So Elise should be able to.
You can vote because it's not a hearing, but you can also abstain if you prefer to.
Okay, I'll abstain.
Okay. Matthew?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. So that motion carries. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Marcel.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank
You
you.
as well.
You as well.
Take care.
All right. And then the next administrative item for us is on the stretch energy code discussion. And Jeff, are you going to be providing the overview or?
Yes, so that'll be myself and Nicole Simpson.
Yes. Okay. Hi, Nicole. It's funny. I was looking at you, but then I was trying to remember if you were a part of this or not. But great. Well, if you guys want to introduce yourselves and enlighten us on it, and then we'll take a few minutes to ask questions and discuss your overview.
Great, thanks so much. For those who are following along, my name is Jeff Rowland. I'm chair of the Sustainable Green Community Committee here in town, and Nicole Simpson's also a member. So we are reintroducing the specialized energy code to the annual town meeting this year. So we'll walk you through a little bit of an overview here. So in Massachusetts, a quick overview, there's 3 levels of the building code. There's a base code, which sets minimum standards, but it's used by a very small proportion of the population. The stretch code until last year was really the main code for the state. But the specialized code was introduced early last year, January 2023. And we've seen towns migrating over to it. Basically, it's a greener amendment to the stretch code. The Hopkinton adopted the stretch code in 2010, which allowed us to qualify as a green community, through which we've gotten quite a few grants. And the specialized code prepares new buildings for net zero and will also be a step for Hopkinton to qualify as a climate leader. So a quick overview of the specialized code, kind of an executive summary, if you will. It's a key action for limiting carbon emissions from new buildings, and I want to stress that the specialized code does not affect renovations or additions to existing buildings. We're talking about new construction only. And so it's an amendment to the code for new construction. It doesn't ban fossil fuels. It adds requirements to offset those emissions, such as pre-wiring for future electrification, and it allows multiple compliance paths for developers. As I mentioned, it would allow us potential additional access to state grants as a climate leader. And if it were to pass at town meeting, it would go into effect for January 2025. So at least a 6-month delay from vote to implementation is required. So why are we doing this? Pretty much because our climate's changing, right? We talk climate change is in the news a lot. We're coming out of our warmest winter on record. We like to include this graph in presentations because it shows fairly starkly where our climate is headed. This is a projected data on the number of days by the end of this century that are expected to be above 90 degrees in Hopkinton. So our kids, grandkids, great-grandkids are going to have 2 to 3 months above 90 degrees, which is a far different climate than we are experiencing today. If anyone's interested in the data, it's from resilient.mass.gov. So in the context of, that problem that's going to keep getting worse, we want to do our part to help reduce our emissions. Obviously, climate change is a global problem, but we want to take care of our emissions here in Hopkinton. And about half of Hopkinton's emissions come from our buildings, especially heating and cooling, air and water. And to achieve net zero in about 20 to 25 years, we need to reduce our building emissions. Next slide, please. And frankly, we're going in the wrong direction when it comes to our buildings. Over the last few years, you can see that that orange section on the bottom, that's gas usage, has been going up and up and up. Now, through the specialized code, we can at least try to get that to flatline a little bit. And for that green section, the homes that are all electric to continue to grow, which is the trend we need over the next 20 plus years. So new homes are predominantly built with gas right now, and we need to shift to the specialized code in order to change that trend. Now I think I'm handing off to Nicole to do a little deeper dive.
All right, so I'm going to explain now what actually is changing when we adopt the specialized code. So you can think of it, we'll go into more details now, but in the simplest form, you can think of it of 2 different paths when you have new construction. You can do all electric, which is an option today, but it's an option that isn't often selected. But That means no gas, oil, or propane connected to the house. It does allow for a backup generator. That is something that you can still be all electric and have that backup generator if that's something you wanted to build with. But the most important thing is the heating and cooling with a high efficiency heat pump. And we can talk more about heat pumps later if you have any questions about that. So why go this path? This means lower emissions by design. If you're all electric, it is inherently lower emissions. And it's building for the needs of the future, not aligned with the way things have been done in the past. So that's a valid option today, but the alternative is mixed fuel. So that's the terminology used for any kind of fossil fuel hookup into the building. There's two requirements that will come with that for a specialized code. Pre-wiring for future electrification. So that means air and water heating, cooking, and clothing drying. If you're using gas for that, then you would need the wiring in place to be able to easily switch that to electric when any of those systems fail and you replace it. It makes it easier for that future building owner to make that choice to switch to electric. And you think about where we'll be 10, 15, 20 years from now when they'd be making that choice, it's going to be much more common and the obvious choice at that point for switching. So pre-wiring, while your building is being constructed, it's open, you're doing the electricity anyway, it's putting these wires in place while you're designing that electric panel and building the house. It's going to be much more cost effective at that time. The second thing is on-site solar. A certain amount of solar would be required in any building, with any building that is doing the mixed fuel option. So why do this? It's offsetting those fossil fuel emissions that would be coming from that building by doing the solar. And it prepares it to be easier to transition to electric down the road using that pre-wiring. So here's the full map of compliance. So if any time you're not sure on the criteria, I'd suggest referring back to this chart because this really has it all captured on here. So we're going to walk through these 4 different categories of buildings that have slightly different requirements around them. Everything in yellow is what's coming with the specialized code. The things not shaded yellow already exist within the stretch code. So let's start with a single family home that's less than 4,000 square feet. If you go all electric, no changes to the code, you can follow what's in the stretch code. If fossil fuels are used, you need to pre-wire for those electric appliances in those categories I mentioned before. And you would need a minimum of 4 kilowatts of solar on site. It does allow exceptions for shaded sites. So if there's trees that are causing shading on the roof, there's certain criteria around roof angle, direction, and if it doesn't make sense to put solar on that building, it's not going to be forced. So you have those exceptions, but the expectation is 4 kilowatts of solar if you're using fossil fuels. And for context, if you look back at the last 15 years, 91% of construction, 91% of the buildings built in Hopkinton were single-family homes less than 4,000 square feet. So that doesn't necessarily tell you what it's going to be in the future, but it gives you some idea that this is the largest group of the types of building categories we're talking about here. The next one is single-family homes greater than 4,000 square feet. All electric, no difference from stretch code. If you're using fossil fuels, then again, you need the pre-wiring. And you need solar, but it needs to be enough solar to offset the emissions of the building on an annual basis. So that means certified zero energy. There are no exceptions for shading in this category. Over the past 15 years, that's represented 6% of all new buildings. It's been a little bit more in recent years than in the past, but overall, that's the percentage for these larger homes. And the reason for this is larger homes have greater emissions. So it's asking, in order to offset that, to do solar to make it zero energy. Next is multifamily residents that are greater than 12,000 square feet. So that's pretty large. For context, that represented 0.2% of all new construction in Hopkinton. It was only 3 buildings in the past 15 years. They were very large buildings, but only 3. Now here, for this specific category, passive house design is required. That is a building standard. It's been around for a long time, but it has principles that including superior windows, mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, continuous insulation, and airtight construction. So you're really energy efficient buildings. And 15,000 units exist or are being built in Massachusetts. So that's what passive house is. It's a particular building standard. And it's more efficient to do that when you're doing a large building. You can kind of take advantage of the size of the building in order to apply these standards. So either all electric or fossil fuels passive house design. If you're using fossil fuels, you still need to pre-wire. And then this path doesn't specifically require solar, so it's just a little bit of a different criteria for that. And finally, commercial construction, that represented 3% of buildings. No code changes for all electric. We'll note that Elmwood School replacement is planned to be all electric in its design, so it complies with the code from the onsite here. If you're using fossil fuels, pre-wiring for electric appliances, this is still for that air and water heating, cooking, and clothing drying. It doesn't apply to other industrial uses. So if you were using the building for manufacturing and had fossil fuels for that system, that isn't part of the criteria. It's really about building operations. There's requirements for solar. It's specified a little bit differently than the other types of buildings, but the way you can think of it is it represents about 25% of the roof if it's a 2-story commercial building. But it could be anywhere on the property. It could be on the roof. It could be covering the parking lot as a canopy. It could be another location on the property. So that's commercial construction. I wanted to note, you may all be aware that Hopkinton was recently named Platinum BioReady. We pride ourselves in having biotech in Hopkinton and want to encourage more. I just wanted to note that there are 9 other municipalities that are Platinum status and have the specialized code. So having this code and adopting this code is not going to change our BioReady status. Those are compatible with each other, and you can see examples of that in other locations in the state. Jeff mentioned earlier this new Climate Leader program. So we've been a green community since 2010. We've gotten over $1 million in grants that have gone to all different energy efficiency projects in Hopkinton. So that's been a great opportunity for us, and us getting in there early has enabled many of these different grants. There's a new program that's starting called Climate Leaders, and one requirement to be a part of that is that you have adopted the specialized code. That will have its own pool of grant funding for those municipalities that are climate leaders. And they can go towards things like ground source heat pumps, solar, or other municipal decarbonization projects. So it helps us reach our environmental goals, and at the same time can lead to operational savings for the town. And when we had a webinar recently, the Green Communities representative actually mentioned about the Hopkins edition, where we're planning to do a ground source heating. That if we were a climate leader, we might be able to apply for a grant for that. So other ways to bring in money to Hopkinton and offset some costs. And for this, we'd only be competing with the other climate leaders, so a few dozen municipalities at this point, hopefully continuing to grow, rather than the 300 green communities that there now are in Massachusetts. As for cost and incentives for new construction, I'm not going to read through all of this, but if you are building all electric, there are a lot of ways to get rebates and money back, a lot of incentives around that. So some for commercial, for homes, for units and passive house design. So there's some examples here. And data shows that with examples of buildings in Massachusetts, building all electric is comparable in price. And often when you incorporate these incentives is going to be less expensive than building the mixed fuel option or fossil fuel option. If you are going the fossil fuel path, then rewiring, it will add some cost. It should be a modest amount of added cost because you are already doing electric work. So there's some there, but it would be much less than what it's going to cost that building owner down the road to add that electric wiring. And then for solar, you can follow any ownership model. You can own it where, you know, you would be paying upfront for the cost of that, take advantage of the 30% federal incentive, but then all of the electricity generated by that solar would be free for the lifetime of the panels. There's also the lease option or power purchase agreement. So some upfront costs, but the owners would save monthly on their electric bills due to the solar and would avoid future retrofits because of the pre-wiring. For residents, how is this going to impact individuals? Unless you're building a new construction, it should have no personal impact on you. It doesn't impact renovations or additions. There's no tax impact because for inspectors, there's free training. The inspection should be able to be managed by the same staff that we have today. It's just they'd be looking for something a little bit different when they do these inspections. There's potential for more grant money that can save on capital projects and lead to operational savings. And this is a major step forward towards our net zero future, which we voted on in the resolution last year at town meeting. And Elmwood School replacement is just a good example of, you know, a ground source heat pump was chosen for multiple reasons. It's the lowest cost of ownership. There's rebates that will substantially reduce the upfront cost. So the best environmental choice was also the best financial choice. And as I mentioned before, it will be in full compliance with the specialized code. So we made this website called hopspecialized.org. If you want to look into that and read more details on it or reference back to a lot of this material is captured in there. Or if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at the green chair at hopkintonma.gov website, email address rather. So just to summarize, wrap it up, pre-wiring enables an easy switch to electric appliances as those reach end of service and have to be replaced. This is a key action for reducing carbon emissions in buildings. Hopkinton cannot reach net zero without addressing buildings. It is a major part of our emissions, and this is the easy time to do it when you're building something new. You can make those choices from the beginning, and it's a lot easier than the retrofits to buildings down the road. It's cost savings to the homeowner, both short and long term. It gives us increased opportunity for state grant money as a climate leader. And finally, it still allows market choice. Developers and home buyers can choose the path that makes sense for them and be in compliance with this code. That was our last slide. Are there any questions?
All right, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Nicole. Let's go ahead and open it up for a quick round of questions if people have them. Just one preface is, I think this is probably a topic that we could debate all night if we were to get into the details. But I think for our discussion, let's keep it focused specifically on the Hopkinton implications, if that makes sense. I just don't want to get into a debate about why this and not that and other complexities associated with climate change. Questions? Jane.
Sure. No, thank you, first of all, for that excellent presentation. That's really very impressive. So you mentioned in the presentation that correct me if I'm wrong or if I misinterpreted this, but Hopkinton has received over $1 million in grants so far. And I'm just wondering, who was the receiver of these successful grants? And also, what was the scope of work when you applied for these grants? Okay, so there is something here
So,
that
yes,
I'm looking at now.
these are the grants. So it's a number of them that added up to that
Yeah.
over $1 million. I'm not sure if anybody I'm not familiar with what the process was for applying for them, or which departments did that, but clearly we've been successful multiple times with receiving that money, and it covered a variety of different.
During these years, I think we did have a grant writer. I'm not sure if we have one now, but so that could have.
Yeah. Now we do have Julia now, who I believe she's already successfully gotten grants for Hopkinton aligned with developing our climate action plan. And I would expect these would be aligned with her goals, as well as the other departments that are looking to fund something specific that would be a good fit for the climate leader grant money.
Okay, so if I could, with a follow-up, just to summarize, it appears that the main primary receiver of the funding is the town itself, not individual homeowners.
Correct. In the wording for, I mean, this is a new program, so there has been no climate leader money handed out yet, so we haven't seen exactly what projects it's gone to, but the examples they gave, ground source heat pumps, solar, those are pretty big capital projects, but they also leave it open for your own creative ideas around how to apply it. So I would think maybe some environmental justice, equity type projects, if low-income homeowners, if we wanted to start some program around supporting them getting heat pumps. I don't know exactly, but it had some open language for that, but it would have to be a municipal action and not individuals applying to it, is my understanding.
Thanks, Nicole. Jane, just one point to add is that I would bet that the total number of rebates through other programs for homeowners or property owners is actually quite a bit larger than that 1 million dollars. Just, as you look at every solar roof that's been put on has got a pretty big level of support for it as well. And so that just goes straight to the property owners.
Yeah, I understand that. And that's a wonderful program. However, I don't think that was applied for through the grant.
No.
So just one other follow-up, if I could. I think this might be a question that might come up at the annual town meeting, is that gas particularly appears to be, and that I could be incorrect on this, much more inexpensive than straight pure up electric. And I don't know if I agree with that or not, but I'm just wondering how you plan to answer those types of questions when it does come up at town meeting. Because all electric is extremely expensive.
Yeah, so one thing that when people think of all electric, they think of the old heating systems where it was really expensive. The resistive heating is inefficient. When we're talking about heat pumps now, and in this area, specifically the cold weather heat pumps, the technology has changed dramatically in the past 5 or 10 years, where it is a great option in this area. And the operation of a heat pump is different because it's moving heat rather than generating heat. So it requires much less energy to heat a home. I have a system that has no gas backup, and it's very comfortable and effective at heating even on those colder days. And so as far as the cost, you have to factor in the efficiency of the device that makes it a cost effective and can be cost saving compared to oil. it certainly would save
Oh,
money.
I agree. I mean,
Gas, it might be about equal. And oh, there was one other thing I was going to do. Oh, and the cost of electricity, if you do solar, which is not required on the all electric path, but if you add solar, you can reduce your electricity costs. There's not a way to do that with your gas costs. So that's one other consideration to have. So I think heat pumps not being familiar to most people, I think is a limitation on that perception of electric construction is more expensive, where that's not necessarily true anymore, or electric operation, I guess I should say.
And
Okay.
if I could, since we're talking about new construction, the houses built to these new standards are essentially like thermoses. They're so tight air-wise that it doesn't take a very much of an electrical load to heat and cool them.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Let's move on to the next question.
Gary, this is Rob through the chair. Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the context. Maybe I feel like I missed something. Is this stretch energy code an article on the annual town meeting? I guess I don't know what I don't know here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
so
is.
at annual town meeting, we're Article 36.
So I guess whose purview is it the Green Committee's purview to add this? Like, is it in the building code? Where does this kind of regulation fall in the town government?
It's a good question. John, can you enlighten us as to which board or committee officially has purview over energy codes such as this?
It's part of the building code.
And building code is a change to the building code needs to be voted upon at town meeting.
Yeah, so usually building codes, I think, are part of the general bylaws, but Hopkinton, I don't exactly know how it works. I think they reference the building code in the bylaws. There's some connection. So in order for this to be accepted, it has to get approved at town meeting. And then it becomes part of the building code that Hopkinton operates under.
So, Rob, what I can say is that does not fall within the jurisdiction of the planning board. So the session today is strictly informational for us. And I think one of the asks of the Sustainable Green Committee is that we take a vote in support, or that we vote to see if we are in support of it, although worth noting that is a non-binding vote in any way. So
so the question I have, I get, so thank you through the chair. One question I did have then is at town meeting, one thing that'll be discussed is the cost to build a home with this type of heating and the cost to continue to run a home with this type of heating and cooling. And I'm a big believer in the impact of climate change and like we need to do everything as a society we can. So that's all makes sense to me. But the discussion, has the Sustainable Green Committee looked to do some projections for, like, they said 91% of new homes since 2009 are 4,000 square feet. A 4,000 square foot home, what is the difference in cost to install, cost to a builder? And what's the difference in the cost to a homeowner? Those are the two costs I'd like to be informed with.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the 91% were less than 4,000 square feet. Greater than 4,000 square feet was about 6%.
Okay, less than, so if they're, okay, so do you know the new homes, what the difference in cost to install this type of heating versus
So typically for a home, it's going to be an air source heat pump. It could be a ground source heat pump. And there is one one street in Hopkinton that was built with all ground source heat pumps. So that's a possible path, but most of the time you're going to choose air source for a home. So when you're choosing that for a building, it's one system for both heating and cooling versus a separate furnace and air conditioner. So right there, that's potential savings. And also, if you look at the rebates available between the Inflation Reduction Act, Mass Save, and some of these other incentives, if you're building all electric, there's substantial savings. So that's why when you look at the data for Massachusetts, I think it doesn't even factor in these incentives. When it's about equal to build either way, you put in these incentives, you can be saving money on that construction. For operating the house, like I was saying before, with a heat pump, it's probably going to be similar to gas in cost, less expensive than oil. But as Jeff mentioned, with changes recently made to the stretch code around the HERS rating and the insulation and how it's built, I think one consultant that we heard speak on this said, if you lost power for a week, your house would still be at 50 degrees at the end of the week. These are very efficient houses. And so overall, the heating intensity is much less than what you would see in an older house, based on changes to the stretch code, which we have either way. So, so for that cost difference, I think there is some concern from builders because it's something new and something they may not be familiar with, but the data indicates that this is going to be about equal or save money.
Thank you. Through the chair, one last comment is I think all of the activities to support reducing any climate change impacts is necessary, but I think for town meeting year, it would be worth your while to have like numbers and I would put more concrete projections together that could be shared. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rob. Other questions or comments from the board?
Through the chair, I second Rob. Oh, you can go ahead, Matt. You raise your hand.
You can go, Parker.
Thanks. I just wanted to echo Rob's sentiment. Is like the Jeff's comment I feel was most impactful. Like, you know, my in-laws just went through and they have a home now they just built with the current standards, and anecdotally, for whatever it's worth, that it's, you know, the house I live in is 30 years old, and they literally, you know, they have to like open windows because it's so warm when they're south facing because of how efficient these are. But being able to like show the upfront investment is worth it, and the investment that we put into these standards as a community, folks, you know, 30, 50 years down the line are going to have to inherit not only our, you know, carbon footprint essentially collectively as a community, but more importantly, if we ever hypothesize doing things like Holden does with Holden Electric to try and create our own utility in Hopkinton to reduce costs, we want to make sure that we're, you know, putting infrastructure in place that's going to have the lowest per kilowatt per hour consumption of, you know, our homes in aggregate, because what folks build, they're, you know, probably not going to change for a century. So to echo Bob's point, like figuring out how to show that the investment is worth, like, not just for operating for, you know, homeowners themselves and how efficient it is, but for a community and writ large, how it could benefit us for future, you know, opportunities too. But just really appreciate this. I think it's really great work that you guys have done. Just thank you very much.
Matthew?
Yeah, just to reiterate how Parker ended that his statement there. I really like the presentation. I remember when this was presented, I think it was a special town meeting. I was a strong supporter of it, and just listening to the debate there, I think the thing that got lost on people is that this wouldn't impact them directly in the way that they thought it would, right? In terms of their current houses and what they were allowed to do. And I think a lot of people had a mental model of this like 1990s, 1950s built house, and you know, look at the air going out the windows. So like, I guess that, just reiterating what Parker said, I think that's the one thing maybe to really to think about adding is just how efficient these houses would be, and these are new houses. They're designed to a high level of encapsulation, and as we see with people building new houses, this comes up time and time again. We tend to be building very expensive houses in town anyway, with people that are able to do that. But thank you very much for continuing to drive this. Big supporter. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And if not, I have just a couple of them. And I do really like the idea. And I think for Jeff and Nicole, maybe it's worth just, I realize that it's impossible to capture average costs across a lot of different home styles and options and whatnot. But I do think it might be helpful to have an anecdote or an example of, say, a typical 3,000 square foot home built with, with some different options for people to price out. I think that would just really help create an illustration of what people are looking at here. For perspective, my brother-in-law lives in a house with geothermal heating. It is probably a hair over 4,000 square feet. His electric bill is in the wintertime, which is all, lighting, appliances, and heating is less than $250 a month. And don't get me wrong, the capital investment is substantial, but that's also where the incentives are based within the state program. So that's just one example. I'm not saying that that's, to Nicole's point, the air systems are far more common and less expensive, but they're also, less efficient than the geothermal. I think just some examples, if you could even pull typical houses in some capacity, not going to be perfect, but I think that might be help people understand what's at play here. Just two quick questions. And Jeff, you commented on this some, but with this new code, are there also new insulation or environmental envelope tightness considerations?
So with the specialized code, no. The stretch code, which we currently have, went through some changes within the past year that are still phasing in. So that's complicated the discussion to some extent. And that was some of the feedback that we received at a special town meeting in the fall. Nicole, if you could actually go to slide 25 in the supplementary, please. I think that would help highlight it. There we go. So over time, you'll see that the HERS rating, which, energy efficiency rating for homes, has come down. The lower the HERS rating, the more efficient the building is. So you'll see that in 2023, the stretch code, that's the blue line down the middle, dropped to 52 from 55. If communities had adopted the specialized code basically as early as possible in 2023, they would have jumped to HERS 42 really quickly within 6+ months. However, on the timeline that we've been, even at special town meeting, by adopting the specialized code, our HERS rating would have dropped to this at the same rate as at the stretch code. So in summary, the specialized code may have dropped the HERS rating sooner, but not on the timeline we were pursuing. But all of the HERS rating changes are happening as part of our current code.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. And I guess my last comment, and I'm glad that there's some additional incentive for larger houses. I know that the specialized code is not one that you guys developed, but I just personally wish there was more incentive to build small homes instead of large homes because, it's just my personal opinion. But all right, so question for you, Jeff. As I mentioned before, this is non-binding on our behalf, but would you like us to take a vote in support of this? And like I said, it doesn't carry any weight, but if you'd like us to, then I think we can certainly do that.
Well, it'll carry weight in my heart, Gary. How about that? So actually the select board did the same thing when we presented to them. Was that a few days ago or last week? I've lost track of time, but yeah, we would appreciate that because to Rob's point, there is confusion as why this is coming from Sustainable Green Committee and not from the planning board. Building codes are in kind of a gray area ownership wise.
Okay. Well, so John, I'm looking to actually, if you can stop sharing your screen and only so that I can see everybody. But I think, John, help me word this correctly. And sorry, Jeff, it's Article 36?
36. 36.
All right. So then I would entertain a motion for the planning board to support Article 36 from the Sustainable Green Committee in favor of the Massachusetts Specialized Energy Code.
Point of clarification. So are we voting to support or are we voting to take a vote of support?
I'm not sure I understand the difference.
Are we making a motion to actually support it, or are we making a motion that we should take a non-binding vote of whether we support it or not?
Well, I think it's non-binding either way because this isn't within our jurisdiction.
Through the chair.
John, do you have a recommendation? Sorry.
Yeah, I think Matt is just trying to say, are we voting right now to see if the planning board should vote on a recommendation, or are we actually voting on a recommendation? And to answer Matt's question, I think we're voting on a recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah. And it might just be easier to say the planning board recommends approval of Article 36.
Okay. In that case, I'll entertain a motion that the planning board recommends approval of Article 36.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion?
Through the chair.
Yes, John.
Just a point of clarification for everybody. This isn't going to go in the official motions document. So somebody in the planning board will probably have to stand up at town meeting if the board approves the recommendation, they'll have to voice that at the microphone.
All right. Thanks, John. Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Elise?
Elise, yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. So thank you, Jeff and Nicole. Appreciate your work on this. And we'll see you at town meeting.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
folks. Really appreciate it.
All right. So moving on, we have continued public hearing for MBTA communities zoning amendments. John, any update?
So the only update we've had is the Attorney General's office has reviewed and only had one comment saying that they are a little concerned that the site plan requirement may get a sideways look from the EOHLC because they generally don't want any kind of regulation to slow these types of developments. Town council is currently discussing it with them and making the argument that multifamily is not allowed anywhere in town without a special permit or site plan approval. So having this have to get a site plan approval is actually the easiest path forward for any multifamily currently allowed in Hopkinton. So that's really the only comment we received. We have not gotten anything back from EOHLC. So if there are going to be amendments, we may just have to amend the motion on the floor of town meeting, because that's probably when we're going to get it. So at this point, I think the planning board is free to make a recommendation on the language we currently have. And then if there is any change to language, which we hope there won't be, the board would just take another vote at town meeting, whether to recommend the new language or not.
Okay, but to your point, the standard we're applying to MBTA community zoning is the same that we would apply to multifamily. So we're not
It's actually less, yeah. It would
yeah,
not require
we're not creating any additional work or slowing the process down beyond what we would have in our existing zoning. So I mean, from the intent of the law, we have a pretty sound argument there.
That's what we believe.
Okay. I'll open it up to the planning board. Any questions or comments? Any new questions or comments? As this is a public hearing, are there any final comments from the public? All right, well, I think this is, I don't know, meeting number 12 or 13 or something on this. So on that, there's no further discussion. I will entertain a motion. The planning board recommend the town meeting approve MBTA communities bylaw and map article as written in the 2024 annual town meeting warrant.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Rob, how do you vote?
No.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. So that motion carries, and we'll be prepared. I'm sure that we will have some discussion at town meeting. How are we in time? Oh, we're trending in the right
Through
direction.
the chair,
Yes, John.
just need to close that hearing now.
Oh, thank you. I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing for the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaws and zoning map.
So moved.
Rob, second.
So no further discussion. Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Jane, yes.
Elise?
Elise, yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary's a yes as well. All right. Stormwater regulations. John, you want to walk us through current update? You're muted, John.
Sorry, I'm just looking to share the document. And Emily from Time Bond is also here. She can walk through a little bit more detail. But as the board may know, we had a lengthy red line document at the last meeting, and then there was some discussion about tree preservation. So the board directed Time Bond to add back in the tree preservation language. And so this document currently has that language redlined. Everything else that was redlined has been accepted. So this is just the tree preservation language that has changed. And let me get down to it. So I believe it's really just this one item and then the definitions that pertain to the tree protection.
All right. And so no other changes. So I guess that was the only one. We accepted the rest of the red lines.
Yes, correct. Well, not officially, but you directed Time Bond to accept them. So
yeah,
the rest of the changes are incorporated already. These are the
Okay.
two changes to the definitions, and I believe that was it. Just some renumbering. Yep, that looks like it's it.
All right. Any questions or comments from the board? Or any questions or comments from the public? All right. Then on that note, I will entertain a motion that the board approves the modifications to the stormwater regulations as proposed, dated April 22nd, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Is there any further discussion? All right. Seeing none. Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, no.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. So that motion carries. And I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing for the stormwater regulations.
So moved.
Second.
Assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. All right, moving on to continue public hearing at Elmwater Farms 3, stormwater management permit from Toll Brothers. I see Mr. Merchant is on. I see folks from Bowler. Lots of people on here. Ted, why don't we, do you want to kick things off and give us a status update as to where you're at? And then we can go from there.
Sure, I'll let Matt from our team do that.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Thank you. Matt Ashley with Bowler. Yeah, so we haven't been in front of the board for a little bit, so just kind of wanted to give a quick recap of what's been going on behind the scenes here, and then kind of walk you through updates as they're on the plans relative to the stormwater permit, if that's okay with the board.
Sure.
Awesome. So just to get everyone refreshed here, we were back in front of the board in February for a stormwater management permit for the existing subdivision of 20 lots off of Blueberry Lane. After that February meeting, we had a site walk the following weekend in February, where we walked the center line of the proposed roadway with board members and neighbors. Overall, got some good feedback from everyone out there that we took into consideration while making updates to the plans. And then subsequent to that, the town also authorized PAR to conduct a peer review on the development, which we've been coordinating with them since February when we got our first comment letter. And then in addition to that, we've also been working with the town and DPW relative to the proposed updates that are going on out here overall. So what I'm planning on doing is I kind of do high level updates as it relates to the peer review, and then also to the DPW coordination meetings that we've been having. The review memo in general is relatively technical and very specific to some certain stormwater items. So I won't go line by line, but kind of just hit on the stuff that updated the plan. And also see Bobby here, so he can chime in if I miss or I forget something. But I'll go ahead and share my screen. I'm guessing I have permission. I do. Great. And can everyone see that? See, awesome. All right. So just as a general reminder, this is the proposed development that we're here for the stormwater management permit. It's a 20 lot subdivision with 20 houses and 2 new roadways, Myrtle Avenue and Fitch Avenue. So there was an existing stormwater design out there, but looking to make improvements here and do that through the stormwater management permit. So as a reminder, something we went over before is one of the first things we were asked to look at was increasing the measure for rainfall. So we did use the NOAA rainfall data here, which I think is a part of your new stormwater regulations, but not at the time that we did this, but we incorporated that into our design. And so what that did is made us take a closer look at all the stormwater infrastructure in Myrtle and Fitch Avenue, and making sure it was adequately sized for the larger storm events. So we did that, and the result of that was upsizing a couple of the pipe runs in Fitch and Myrtle Avenue, and along with the stormwater quality units down at the end here. The other improvements that we made here, which weren't previously proposed, was some yard drain infrastructure kind of along the back of the units here. So specifically, we introduced yard drains that would collect runoff coming down the hill and intercept it before it got on to Fitch Avenue, Myrtle Avenue, or all the way down to Blueberry Lane and all the existing houses here. So that would be collected and routed around and tying into the existing stormwater infrastructure in Blueberry Lane and down to the existing stormwater basins. No different than what's happening under today's conditions. We're just intercepting it sooner to hopefully reduce water getting to the proposed lots and the existing lots on Blueberry. And I know this question will probably come up. This was in addition to the existing French drain system that is out there that was required by conservation. So that already exists on the plans here. We're not changing that, required to put that in. This is just another measure for that as well. Some of the coordination that we've had with DPW was relative to foundation drains and not having those tie into Myrtle or Fitch Avenue. Most of the lots as currently proposed on this plan set do not tie in, they daylight or go out back. And we feel confident that we can get the couple remainder lots tied in, so those won't go to Fitch and Myrtle Avenue. However, the best course we believe with the yard drains is to have that tie in and come around and do tie into that stormwater infrastructure. And then one of the items, or a couple items I think that have come up from abutters or neighbors in the town was the existing water on Blueberry Lane. And during our site walk, actually, we kind of met down in this corner over here. And there was talks about some, standing water here where our proposed driveway is. So we took that feedback to heart and relooked at this intersection and are now proposing some catch basins down by this corner here. Being out there on site, it looked definitely flat. And the applicant is going to be doing some, utility connections in here, and we have the opportunity to reduce that impact, but ultimately was decided to move catch basins, which were a little further up on site, closer to this intersection to reduce the possibility of standing water kind of down in that corner. The second area that I think came up during our first meeting was runoff from the school, which is located up in this area here. So during the field visit, we took a look at that and the stormwater, a visual observation of the school back here and kind of what was happening. So one of the updates that we did is take a look at that area, see where it was coming out. And it's kind of just like a flared end section up on this slope here. And, during rain events activates sometimes. So we took a look at that flow, where it comes on to our development, and then actually increase the stormwater yard drain infrastructure back here to be able to capture that runoff potentially from what we could see out in the field. So that's one of the updates that we made here. One of the items that Bobby and I have been working on is groundwater recharge on this development, and trying to do the max extent practicable on site here. So what we did here is introduce stormwater chambers on each of the individual lots. See if I can get a better picture here, hopefully. There we go. So you can see these chambers here on these lots. And the idea there is to collect clean runoff from the proposed roofs and recharge that back into the ground. And then the other way we're getting volume, not recharge, but to clean the water is the water quality units down here by the intersections, and then ultimately into the detention basins, which are proposing improvements to them and themselves and get them kind of back up to where they were when they were initially proposed. With that being said, we're not quite meeting the recharge calculations, but that is due to the existing conditions on the site. So not a lot of great opportunities due to the type of soil that is out here. It's largely a C and D type soil, which isn't great to promote infiltration. But we did incorporate it everywhere that we could, and Toll did test pits on all these different lots. So we have a good idea of where we would be able to infiltrate or not infiltrate here. And then the last item we just wanted to bring up too is maintenance. It is a little unique as this is a lot subdivision, and just making sure where everything is, who's ultimately going to be responsible for these different areas. So just put together a quick little exhibit here kind of for a visual. So the blue represents kind of the yard drains and French drain systems on there. So those would go under an easement plan, and that would be maintained by the homeowners association out here. Everything in green would be the roadways and the existing basins, which doesn't change from the condition today. That would be maintained by the town. And then the last one is the orange ones, which are all these little subsurface systems, and that would be maintained by the individual homeowner. So that is a quick recap of everything that's going on and kind of the improvements that have been made here. But happy to answer any questions that anyone else has, or Ted, if I missed anything that you wanted to bring up.
Nothing for me. I think it'd probably be good to have Bobby go over his review.
Yes, thanks, Ted. That's just, I was just going to ask if, Bob, I think, as we've often said, we rely a lot on you and your professional guidance here, as none of us are professional engineers. So if you would be willing to share your most recent review and letter. And my ask is just to highlight the major discrepancies that you've highlighted and have been addressed. And if there's anything specific that is not yet closed out with the applicant, then we can get some measure as to what's left to do. And potentially if we need to make a decision on it, then we can do so.
Sure. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Good. So yeah, we went through like 3 iterations of common resolution letters with the applicant and met on several occasions. The resolution letter is about 11 pages long, 24 major comments that we feel were addressed. There's still 2 items that we want to bring to the board's attention. We'd be happy. I can share my screen. We can go through the letter if you'd like, or we can just touch on the major items.
Yeah, why don't you share your screen? Like I said, we don't need to go through all of them, and we've all had the opportunity to review that letter, but I think particularly on the 2 that you're looking for some input, it'd be helpful to have the visual reference.
Sure. I'm having. Just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
see. So I think it's mentioned in several comments, but essentially the plans don't currently meet minimum standard 3 for recharge. We do recommend that they look for additional opportunities to infiltrate on site. We do understand that there is shallow groundwater, poor soils, and that through the Conservation Commission approvals that groundwater and shallow groundwater and groundwater impacts to adjacent properties has been identified as a concern. But we do recommend that additional low impact development BMPs be reviewed for implementation throughout the project site. So that's one of the comments.
Sorry, Bob, let's talk about that one before we move on. Matt, what's your Matt or Ted for that matter? Why not conform to that standard or expectation?
So typically for sites like this, we do what we can to provide and meet the recharge requirement. But we can only do as much as what the area is going to allow us to do. So the C and D type soils have very limited infiltrating properties to them, which would allow us to infiltrate. And then again, with the high groundwater out here, again, you won't be able to infiltrate as much with that. So we did, test pits on every single site to look at areas where we could install subsurface systems everywhere. And we put it in everywhere that it was appropriate to install and that we would feel confident that would infiltrate. So the regulation says, there are circumstances where you don't have to meet it, but you have to prove that the area doesn't promote infiltration. And that's what we feel this development fits between the type of soils and then the high groundwater here.
So just for clarity, especially for the homeowners on Blueberry Lane, what happens to that water that is not infiltrated?
Well, that would be, sorry, go ahead. I don't know if you were going to say something.
Yeah,
that would be stormwater.
Yeah, you can answer, Matt. Sorry.
Yeah, so it'd be stormwater runoff. So that's why we're incorporating all of the yard drains and the French drain system that was previously proposed, so we can collect that. But the recharge requirement specifically is about collecting runoff from your site and putting it back into the ground. In a sense, does that answer your question?
Yes. So it's kind of, I hate the expression belt and suspenders, but for the water that isn't absorbed back on site, then it is effectively through the stormwater system that's designed, it effectively moves the water into a drainage system that takes it elsewhere. Is that fair?
Yep.
Yeah. The minimum standard's designed to replicate the existing groundwater condition. So essentially, we don't want to deplete that aquifer or any of the adjacent wetlands. So you want to try to put the same amount of water back into the groundwater that the existing site currently does. And that's what you're trying to mimic. Not meeting that standard means that you're actually removing groundwater and that there'd be less volume of water infiltrated into the ground. Understanding that there may be competing interests in reviewing the Conservation Commission conditions and Beta's previous peer review that was completed, it sounds like groundwater is a concern or it is an issue out there currently for some of the abutting property owners. So meeting that standard or replicating that condition may not be the maximum extent, may be the better condition here, or maybe the better route.
Sorry, Bob, can you restate that last part?
Sure. So possibly allowing them to meet this maximum extent practicable condition might be preferred in this case. Yeah.
Might be preferred for the homeowners and the abutters.
Correct.
As opposed to recharging the existing site with all the water that falls down on it.
Correct.
Any, I think it's probably easier to deal with these one at a time. Questions or comments about this from the board, or if people have immediate reaction as to whether they're comfortable with the applicants and how they're addressing this.
Through the chair, I just had one.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Jane.
I noticed when the folks were doing the presentation, by the way, that's very helpful. There were several, most of the homes on the upper part of the map showing the homes showed French drains, but there were a couple on the corners that the homes did not incorporate the suggested French drains. I'm wondering why, what was the reason behind that, as opposed to enclosing the whole development with French drains on the north and south, northwest and east sides.
Matt?
Would you like, yeah, I can answer that. So we mimicked the existing proposed plans on where they wanted them to be installed. And I wasn't specifically involved with that, but essentially all the French drains are located where any runoff is coming off of our site. So on a couple sides, water's coming onto our site, so it doesn't make sense to have a French drain system there. But it's where the topo, suggests that the rainfall and runoff is going to leave our development. Does that make sense?
It does, but taking into consideration the previous conversation about absorbing or deflecting other waters, would it be beneficial to think about extending those French drains or not? I don't know anything really about this. I'm just thinking outside the box here.
If I could, maybe. I think that a lot of the yard drainage systems that we have and the road network itself will act in that fashion as well. So anything that maybe you're thinking about getting captured from, call it Page up, and I think that's the east, ultimately does get captured in some of the infrastructure that is getting installed and will drain that way as well, while not maybe as formal as the other. I think it will act in the same fashion.
Thank you.
Other questions or thoughts?
Through the chair, to the applicant, well, I guess I'm trying to understand is how is the future, because this whole terrain, and I've talked to a few residents that live in the area, not only when we did our site walk, but also folks that live, uphill. And there's concerns from residents about, runoff from future, development. And I'm just curious, to what extent did, I think it's called Charleswood is the new name, but did additional development farther up the hill factor in your design, if any at all? And if that should be considered, or if we can't, as part of the scope of this discussion, ask for that to be considered. There's just been, I talked to a lot of folks, and there's a lot of concern about future development, and how this plan may and should factor that growth.
So Parker, I can take that one, and it's a good question. But we're actually going to be discussing it on the next hearing. But long story short, the Charleswood, sorry, we're not talking about that one yet. We're talking about Hopkins, but Charleswood School will be required to manage all of their water on their site. So I realize there might be some skepticism as to whether or not that actually happens, but there will be a full stormwater management plan for that site, and the expectation and our peer-reviewed engineers will be reviewing that to make sure that the stormwater is managed on their site.
Gary, can I ask a question as an abutter of the school, of the representative of the school, as a future abutter or soon to be abutter for the Charleswood School?
Tim, you can ask, we are a very open group, so you can ask a question regardless of your potential relation with the project.
I appreciate that. I guess my question is, what's the expected impact of runoff to the future school property at 147 set back there? without the extra recharge on site? Is there anything that I'm gonna have to consider as we build that project?
So I'll defer to Matt and Ted, but I believe that the school site is uphill of the site we're talking about here. So this project should have zero impact on Charleswood. Unless you can figure out a way to make water go uphill.
I agree.
Okay,
Does that answer your question?
it does.
All right, any other questions or comments? How do people feel? I mean, I'm personally comfortable with the recommendation here because to the comments made earlier, if anything, it actually will help with groundwater on the existing parcels as well as potentially the new parcels. But if people feel otherwise, now is the time to talk about it.
Through the chair, I am as well. The EPA has these grants for NPS water runoff that enable municipalities to be able to secure funding for water mitigation, runoff, and improvement. And so I don't think like there's 2-door and 1-door decisions, and I don't believe this is a 1-door that once we go through it, we can't go back. I just, echo some of the sentiments of residents that are farther down the hill that when we did our site walk, we're, gravely concerned. And I think that, through the entire process that the Toll Brothers have been, I believe they didn't even have to come to us to discuss, some of their plans initially, and they've been, willing participants to seek and, gauge our, collaboration. So we appreciate that, but I don't have concerns. And there's also funding mechanisms in the future that we can take advantage of if there needs to be improvement. So that's my 10 cents for what it's worth.
All right, any objections to the proposed?
No objections. Can I just ask a question through the chair though?
Sure.
Has the developer, like, obviously stormwater, there's a high, you stated there's a high water table in this area. And there's all these stormwater mitigation things that need to be done to comply with the regulation. In general, I'm envisioning a scenario where every one of these homes will have a sump pump. They'll be running continuously, and that water will go out, be pumped out of their sump pump hole in their basement and go back into the ground, and it'll just be a continuous cycle because the water can't get that far. Is that level of like thinking of like, are all these homes going to have sump pumps, and like, where's the water going to go from just the basic functioning of a home? Has that been considered?
I can tackle that one.
Sure.
Go ahead,
So
Tim.
I guess twofold. Number one, as Matt mentioned, we did do a bunch of test pits through our due diligence out here, and believe that we have all of our homes sited above the groundwater table in general. And then number two, we also have foundation drains designed for all of these homes, which are shown on the plans. I know DPW's comment is that they don't want them tied directly into the town-owned system, but we do have many of them either daylighting or tied into the homeowner association maintained yard drains. So our goal as a company, really not just on this project but everywhere, is to try to have foundation drains gravity out rather than sump pump out. And all of that water, as it's designed, will either daylight or be routed through the stormwater system.
Any follow-up, Rob? You're muted, Rob.
When you say daylight it out, like it's got to go somewhere. So it's got to go to a retention basin, or it's got to go to a low spot somewhere. Like, where is it going to go?
So I think ultimately, and Matt can probably check me on this, but I would say the vast majority of these homes are connected to the stormwater system. So ultimately it goes to the detention basins where all of this stormwater is designed to go. for those few that are daylighted. Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they all ultimately gravity from, reaching daylight to a stormwater BMP, and ultimately get into that same system, whether it's overland or underground directly connected to the stormwater system. So, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any of this daylights directly to neighbors behind us, any of the Blueberry residents. I believe it's all ultimately captured in the stormwater system that we're proposing.
That's correct.
And that's actually the next comment I wanted to discuss. So there's actually a section in your rules and regulations that prohibit the perimeter drains or cellar drains being tied into the public system. In the DPW at our meeting, we had a meeting with the applicant, the DPW, and John, the planner. They were very adamant against these tie-ins. So just something that we want to bring to the board's attention also.
All right, so I think we already heard from the applicant on that. Matt or Ted, do you have anything additional to add on that request to tie these into the stormwater management system?
I think I just mentioned one thing is the plans that, well, maybe two things. First, the plans that we show 3, I believe, foundation drains tied directly into the system, and we think we have an avenue to reroute those so that they are not, and we can make that change either as a condition if this were to move forward, or if we need to, we can make a plan revision. I think the second part of this is, we were approached by the town and have heard from all of the neighbors on Blueberry that water is an issue. We've seen that as we've gone to start site work also. Water is an issue out there, and whatever we can do, I think, to capture and route that water through the stormwater system will be beneficial not only for the development itself, but also for the existing Blueberry neighbors. I think a lot of what we're proposing will do that already, and the foundation drains that we're talking about will only supplement that.
All right, thanks, Ted. I don't think we have anybody from DPW here. John, and I'm not sure if you're comfortable, but can you help us understand what the DPW concerns or reservations are with tying those 3 systems into the stormwater management?
Sure. And I'm not going to speak as an expert on this, but it's my understanding that those are against DPW regulations regarding municipal stormwater. So it wouldn't be allowed per their regulations.
Okay. And I don't know, maybe this is just speculation, but I'm curious if that's just a design principle, because they don't want to just create additional burden, and they want to encourage stormwater management on site. In general, I'm not a fan of bending regulations to build more houses. But in this situation, and given all of the issues that Blueberry Lane already has, it makes me question sort of whether there's a net benefit to this. And but I guess I'm just curious. I mean, and again, if you can't do that because it's speculation, but what are the repercussions of doing this beyond a violation of the DPW standards?
Through the chair. Yeah, well, you can finish your thought. Gary, you're asking John?
Yeah, I'm asking John.
Okay. It basically sets a precedent, right? If they are allowed to tie into the municipal stormwater system, then what's to say another development that also has soil issues or drainage issues would not have the same right? And so I think it's just keeping it fair and even across the board, that this is the policy, no one gets to tie in, and therefore the town is not responsible for the water that's coming into the municipal stormwater system from a private development. Because in our stormwater regulations, they're intended to treat it on site. And it would be a cost that the town as a whole would have to bear, and could potentially, with more drainage, with more rainfall happening and more drainage issues in the future, likely, it could just be something that becomes assumed by some developers to happen in the future, and they plan for it, and then it's a difficult thing to stop.
Okay, thanks, John. Parker, do you have a comment?
I think I'm not an expert on this, but I've been getting deeper on the stormwater regs just because of the work we've had to be doing and had done recently. And I think one of the reasons for having on-site mitigation is to reduce what the EPA calls non-point source pollution. So they want to try and maintain and not have, pollution from certain zones run off into others. Is based on the research I've been doing. Again, I'm not an expert, but I think that could be part of the reason why DPW might not want it. But just for your record, there are funding sources available to be able to help mitigate instances like this. And I know that especially for the residents of Blueberry Lane, to be able to get as much of that off-site as they have already expressed, like this is an issue, this could be a benefit to those folks. So I don't know, I'm not trying to tell folks how to think on this, but I think that for many of the residents, they don't want the water to go downhill, and this could potentially help with that mitigation.
Yeah. Yep. Matthew.
What I guess, Gary, I'm kind of with you here in terms of like, this seems like a net benefit might be something that as a town we'd want to try and figure out how do we get more of that water into the storm drains anyway, even if there weren't a development here, just to help the people that live in that area. I mean, would DPW, how would we go about doing that? And would this just be, could we avoid setting a precedent by kind of, I don't know, having a statement that, this would be work that we'd have planned anyway as a town? I'm just not sure either how we would go about getting that done without causing any problems down the road.
Yeah, I think someone once gave me the guidance in these types of issues that the rules are your friend, and when we start deviating from them, it can create a lot of additional challenges down the road. And I hear you that this may just be a way of it's not gonna either cause or solve the problem, but even if it's something, if it's some percentage of reduced risk of water, then for the residents that could be a good thing. But again, what makes me nervous is how do we consider something like this? And I don't have a mechanism for that right now. I mean, the alternative is always to, in case in point, they've presented two different options here. I see Ted has raised his hand. Maybe Ted has a suggestion as to how we can avoid setting precedent here.
I think that I do. And I can't say that I'm an expert on the regulation, but if I'm reading what Bobby's note says, that the DPW regulation is that the perimeter drain and cellar drains shall not be connected into manhole and catch basin structures. I think that we can accomplish everything here without doing that. I think that we can tie all our footing drains into the yard and area drains that are owned and operated by the homeowners association. We have 3 that are shown that are not, but I think I stated before that we can route those across other lots. We would have to create easements, but we can do it such that those 3 tie into other homeowner association owned and maintained infrastructure, and we can avoid tripping over this particular regulation.
I'm not sure how to raise my hand, but I think the intent of the regulation is that the public system manages public stormwater and not private stormwater. Right. I think routing them through the homeowners association's infrastructure and eventually discharging into the public system, you're still discharging to the public system. I think the intent is for these perimeter cellar drains to discharge, degrade, and not contribute to the public system.
But the counter to that would be that if we pump them to the surface, right, they'll flow across land and ultimately find their way into the road drainage or the French drains that are designed to capture this water anyway. I think ultimately it all makes its way into the system. It's just the method for which it does it, and we're trying to be as efficient as possible to do that. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Some volume will be removed if it discharges to grade. Some volume will infiltrate back into the ground. It may be picked up by other perimeter drains on site. But yeah, without meeting the recharge standard, and with the amount of sub drainage and under drains proposed, I would recommend that they discharge to grade as much as possible.
Right. Planning board. Just looking for kind of I think we've probably have a sense as to what we're looking at here. Just looking for quick reaction as to if people have a preference or strong opinions of one versus the other.
Through the chair.
Sure, Jane, go ahead.
I think that we should abide by the rules where we can, and I think that we'd be opening a can of worms going down the road if we made an exception in this case. It seems to me as though they could recharge to the surface or somehow tie the pipes, the French drains, into retention systems, even if it, costs a little bit more to go through other people's properties to get to those retention basins.
Sorry, Jane, on one hand, you're saying recharge the surface. On the other hand, you're talking about easements to connect them,
I don't think we should tie it into the town system. There are other avenues to take care of the
Okay,
water.
but you are supportive of tying it into the homeowner
Yes.
stormwater
Absolutely.
system.
Yeah, I think that's where it belongs.
Okay, so the argument from Bob is that even if it ties into the homeowner stormwater system, it will eventually still make its way to the public system. Right, Bob?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that eventually discharges to the public system, eventually ties into the public system. Yeah.
Yeah, it's could be that it would be delayed and be absorbed through the ground and just take longer than if it were tied in directly to the town's water system.
It's going to be piped in either condition. So it'd be piped through private infrastructure or public infrastructure. So it's going to get there quickly either way.
Through the chair, I have a question.
Sure, Rob.
I guess not sure if I was under the assumption that whether private stormwater systems could be tied into town systems was in the purview of the DPW, and we didn't have, like, it wasn't our authority to say go ahead or not go ahead. I guess I don't know. I'm asking it as a question.
Yeah, so I guess your question is, even if we were to say, yes, go ahead and tie it in, that might not be our purview to say that.
Exactly.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, that's what that's what I was thinking, and I'm saying, and trying to think out loud and socialize that.
Yeah, so I'll send that over to John. John, can you provide any guidance if that's even within our authority as the planning board to recommend that, if we chose to?
I mean, the planning board isn't beholden to DPW regulations, but the applicant might have problems if they have to get any permits from DPW. or recommendation for accepting the road in the future if DPW is not happy with how it's being designed, and if it's not per their policies, then I don't think it's the planning board's responsibility to govern those policies, but there needs to be some crossover collaboration within the town at some point. So I think DPW has made it clear that they don't want this to happen, and it's up to the planning board whether they want to listen to that recommendation or the comment. But
yeah,
I don't see why it would be. Yeah.
So I'm going to recommend that we uphold the DPW's recommendation and the recommendation of our peer-reviewed engineer. And I can appreciate both sides of this, but I know DPW always, and I think this is true across municipalities in Massachusetts at least, that we really, really want to avoid tying these types of drains into bigger public systems. And I just, in respect to our professionals that we hire and pay, I'm having a hard time coming up with a really solid reason to go against them here. So that's my perspective. That's what I would recommend. Does anybody from the board want to push back on that, or do they feel otherwise? Okay, so I think just based on the lack of verbal comments and the few visuals that I could see, I'm seeing that our preference is to not tie into the system, and that those be managed on the specific properties themselves. Bob, I want to be respectful of time. I know that we have our school folks that are waiting for us. Any other highlights or particular points in your peer review that are worth us discussing or reviewing now?
Those were the two major items. We had about 24 other comments, but everything else was worked through with the applicant and their engineer.
Okay. So I think with the guidance today, I think we've worked through the peer review piece to that. Bob, you agree? Ted, you agree? Okay.
Yep.
So as I said, I know we're making progress here, but I am going to ask that we continue this to our next meeting. We're actually already over our allotted time here. And maybe now is a fair time to ask the board. Our next scheduled meeting would be annual town meeting on May 6th, of course, which we're not going to meet to discuss this. The next meeting after that is currently scheduled for May 20th, which is also election day. So we would not have a meeting there. And so based on that schedule, we wouldn't meet again on this until June, which is a long ways out. So I'm curious to the board if folks would be open to a May 13th meeting, which not only for this project, but my guess is as we progress on the Hopkins School project, might be appreciated by the applicants as well. Would members of the board be open to that May 13th meeting date?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Then if people are okay with it, and Ted, are you open to continuing to May 13th?
Yes, I guess procedurally, I would just want to clarify how this would ultimately come to a close. Would you potentially vote on the 13th?
I anticipate we would be. I mean, we're through the bulk of it. We've still got some work to do in terms of condition review and decision criteria, some other formalities and whatnot. But realistically, we've got probably a half hour left, and then we should be able to wrap up.
So yeah, I'm great to continue to the 13th, and I appreciate you holding that meeting.
Okay. All right, so I'll entertain a motion to continue this hearing to May 13th, 2024. And John, do we need to continue the decision as well? Okay,
Correct.
so then we would continue the decision to May 21st. Does that work?
Yep.
Yeah. So
moved.
All right.
Rob, second.
All right, assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob, yes.
Jane?
Jane, yes.
Elise?
Elise, yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. So Bob, Ted, and Matt, thank you guys. Appreciate it. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So as I mentioned, our last public hearing tonight is in a butter. I'm going to recuse myself. So I will turn this one over to Rob Benson, our vice chair, to facilitate the hearing.
So I think I'd like to entertain a motion to open the public hearing for, let me get the wording right here. Open the public hearing for 90 and 104 Hayden Row, major project site plan and stormwater management permit, Hopkins Lower Middle School, Hopkins School Department.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Matthew, how do you vote?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Elise?
Yeah.
Jane?
Yes.
And Rob is a yes. All right, so I'm going to follow our agenda, our typical outline, where I'm going to ask the applicant for project introduction and basic review of the proposed project. Who's going to be speaking? I see Carol Kavanaugh. I see Susan here. Ashley is going to be kicking off the project introduction. I saw your hand raised. Is that correct?
No, I'm sorry. I will be speaking. Steve Powers will be kicking off the introduction. I don't want to steal your thunder, Steve.
Awesome.
I appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Steve Powers. I'm with Samiotis Consultants, with a civil engineer for the project. We do have a number of people, as you can imagine, that are on tonight, and they will be speaking. I'll go through a presentation. Just want to introduce some of the team members that will be talking. We have Chris Eberly. He's the owner's project manager from Vertex. Dan Cawley is the architect from Perkins Eastman. Ashley, as you know, she is the landscape architect. She's from Traverse, and I saw Tim Person on the call. He is the director of buildings and grounds for the Hopkinton Public Schools. Tim does not have a speaking part tonight unless he wants to. But if there's any questions the board might have specific to the school buildings and grounds, he is the person to speak to. So with that, I'll briefly turn it over to Chris Eberly to introduce the project, and then I will pick it up as we go through the presentation.
So Steve, we also have Dr. Carol Kavanaugh and Susan Rothermick, who are here from the school department as well. So as many of you may know, this project started with a system-wide study in the end of 2022 to make a decision about how the now Charleswood project would be distributed in terms of grades. Coming out of that decision, it was decided that by building a 2-3-4 school at the new Charleswood, it alleviated a lot of the overcrowding concerns, but it didn't address the overcrowding that currently exists at the Hopkins School. The Hopkins School was built for 628 students, and as of the last 2 weeks, it's gained 2 to be at 668. It continues to grow, And we are anticipating that this addition will be designed for 802 students. The addition consists of a 28,000 square foot addition that is going to be added onto the overall building, making the total school 106,000 square feet. We're planning to build it as a phased construction. So we have brought on Commodore Builders as our phased or as our construction manager, and we will be going to town meeting for an article to fund the project. So I'm going to turn it over to, is it Steve or Ashley to speak about the project?
I will do it. Sure. So I'll start off. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Steve Powers. I'm the civil engineering for the project. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
I'll take that as a yes. Okay. Thank you. So just to start off, as Chris went through, here's the existing school. This is an aerial pulled off. We have circulation that comes from the north down into the site for the existing school, and then a loop road that continues out around back up to the north and around back out to the main route that connects to Hayden Row or Route 85 that is shared with the high school. Here's a site locus just to orient everyone. Again, main route coming into the site off of Hayden Row. The Hopkins Middle High School is in this area. The Hopkins Elementary School is right down in this area. And again, Loop Road continues through all the way out. This is the existing conditions plan. It was done by BSC Group, the surveyor for the project. Just to zoom in a little bit, just to give an idea of where everything is. The project school was built and constructed in the late 90s. It was approved through the Hopkinton town boards. The main school building is located here, as I previously mentioned. The connecting road up to the shared Hopkinton High School middle school road is up to the north. Currently, we do have traffic that comes through. It's parent drop off in the rear of the project, comes through, as you can see with the directional arrows through this way, and then back out. Parking is located. Some parking is located to the rear, and this is essentially where the current parent drop off is. Current bus drop off continues down southeast, and then comes to the front of the school drop off before it heads out. The major parking for the area and for the school is located in the southwest corner. So with the proposed development, what we've looked to do is maintain the existing developed area and sort of use that area and reconfigure it to, one, put the addition on that Chris mentioned earlier, and also to preserve the outdoor activity space. Ashley will go through some playground areas, some additional hardscape and fields later. Couple things I do want to mention: we do have existing stormwater management system on the property. This was again done and approved back in the late 90s by the original design engineer. There's a stormwater basin in this area to the north, as well as to this area to the west. We are looking to continue to use these two areas. Additionally, I do want to mention, you can see a number of wetland flags to the north and west of the project. We're currently, we do have a notice of intent on file with the Conservation Commission. We had our first meeting week before last, or I should say last week. And we are looking to, again, limit development and any kind of impacts to the wetland resource areas and associated buffer zones. This is a site prep plan. Essentially, the gray that you do see is the area of disturbance that we're working through. Again, we're looking to reconfigure the site to expand queuing off of the main loop road, add the much needed building addition and building space for the students, reconfigure and add some parking to provide additional parking on site to accommodate the increase in students, as well as reconfigure the athletic fields and outdoor play areas. And this is essentially the plan, the site layout that we're talking about. So just to start with a couple of the revisions and proposed site redevelopment. This is the proposed building addition. It is located almost entirely to the west of the existing school here. I do want to make note that there is a modular building structure that we are proposing here. The timing associated with this may be staggered, so this will not all go in at the same time. This is just additional space that we want to make sure that is accounted for, and we do want to present everything that we do have in the plan now to the planning board. So just to start to the rear or north of the school, we are expanding the proposed parent drop-off and queuing areas to the rear. We're adding additional parking. As you can see, the original parking ends right about in this area here. We're looking to expand that parking and expand the queuing lanes all the way to the west to circle around for parent drop-off to contain more of parent drop-off into the site and not onto the main loop road. Traffic will continue to be one way coming out and then down to the south and east. Similarly, we're trying to keep similar bus queuing, bus routes through the front of the property. Again, buses will queue through this area here, drop off, the main drop off at the front of the school, and then continue out. We are maintaining this access road to the west of the building. This is strictly for emergency purposes. For the most part, it'll be a dual use of emergency purposes if emergency fire or services need to access this area of the school. We do want to provide full access around the school, but for the most part, we are trying to also use this as outdoor space. Again, trying to make this area of redevelopment one contained to the existing area that's currently being used, the existing limits of disturbance, and make it more efficient. Again, we're adding additional parking here along the road, all the way up, and then continuing on up into the northeast, ending here. We do have ADA parking both in the rear that we're proposing in these areas, as well as the front of the building. And we are proposing 14 electric vehicle charging spaces and the dual charges for each of those spaces here, and then to the south and west. Grading will remain relatively the same. There's no substantial changes in grading. We are reconfiguring it a little bit to accommodate the athletic field and to push the grades a little bit further to the north and west to accommodate the proposed building addition. Utilities, again, remaining relatively the same. As far as routing goes, we are extending water around the edges of the building just to make sure we're providing a full loop all the way around the building, and then adding a couple additional fire hydrants for the expanded area. And then sanitary, we are expanding as well down to this area and essentially using the existing sanitary infrastructure. Currently, there is an existing pump station in this area here. We are looking to reuse it. And then there is some expansion of electrical services to the rear, and again, to serve the proposed building addition. So this is the stormwater plan. What we tried to do is use much of the existing stormwater infrastructure as possible, and for the new development and the increase of impervious area, which is just shy of an acre, we're looking to pick up roof leaders from the existing proposed building addition, and then add additional stormwater conveyance structure for the rear parking areas to pick up the additional runoff, route it through this new conveyance system, treat it stormwater quality units. And then our larger recharge system is currently located in this area here. We're looking at a recharge system of right now arch chambers surrounded by stone. It's relatively common for underground systems. And the advantage of using this area here is we're able to accommodate the stormwater management requirements from the stormwater management policy for Massachusetts, as well as the town's stormwater bylaw, and then also reuse the space for athletic fields as well. This area here is currently a geothermal well location. We're currently, I'm not an expert in geothermal wells, but we're currently looking to, we did do a test well, and we're looking to space these throughout the property in an efficient way as part of our sustainability actions throughout the project. I can tell you, we did, as part of the stormwater management design, we did go out and do, we've done a couple rounds of soil testing on site, as opposed to the previous project, which is east of Hayden Road. We did find a little bit better material and a little bit lower groundwater. So we are looking to recharge fully the existing increase in the development in the impervious area. So with that, I can turn it over to Ashley for the landscaping portion of it, but I'm happy to answer any questions in the meantime, or we can certainly save them to the end and answer them all at once.
Steve, I'm just gonna make a few corrections. So what Steve was referring to as the back of the building is the front of the building. And the back where the parent drop off is, the back of the building is where the kids drop off. Just not a bad mistake, Steve, just so people's orientation is correct.
Sure.
Sure. A couple other quick things was, I believe the building was designed for 600 students, and we currently have 688 students in the building, not 668. So, and I only make that correction to let you guys know that 20 kids is essentially the size of another classroom that we're using. So it feels like a small number, but it does make a difference. So just those quick kind of corrections, but keep going, Steve. You're doing great.
Can I just, it was designed for 600 and now what number is it at?
It's at 688.
688. And with the proposed addition, what is the combined school design for in student population?
We're trying to get to 802.
802.
802. Okay.
And we just picked up 20 kids, so it's growing.
So unless it's that, I'm happy to answer any site-specific questions, but Ashley can take it from here. And again, we're happy to answer any questions at the end of this. Too.
One clarification, Steve. I think when we submitted the drawings, we were considering an under drain system for the field, but we are no longer pursuing that. Specifically, just
Correct.
the under drain at the field.
Correct. So you mean the stormwater recharge system at the field?
No, the stormwater recharge system is still there. There was a under drain to alleviate puddles in the athletic field. That was the part
Correct.
that we moved away from.
That's correct.
Chris, thank you so much. And we can speak to that a little bit more too, but thanks, Steve, for going through that. So as a part of the improved circulation, increased parking, we also have some new amenities on site in terms of outdoor play areas, outdoor classrooms, and outdoor spaces dedicated to PE. We've had quite a few programming meetings with the school, and one of the big things we found out is that recess and play can happen, and PE can actually happen at the same time. So we really need to provide two spaces for those uses so that they don't interfere with each other. So some of the nice features of this plan that you see in front of you is a more of a recess zone, has a new playground with age-appropriate play and climbers, things with a little bit more difficulty. You'll see that right to the left of the emergency drive. It also includes a half basketball hoop right down below that. And you have these really strategic amphitheater seats So they're just really low seat walls built into the grade at that backside of the module. And then that offers outdoor classroom opportunity and seating for anything happening there. We're also taking full advantage of that emergency drive when it's closed off during the day for use with hardscape games. So that's a really great spot to have those. And then the PE zones are to the right of the emergency drive between the outdoor classroom. PE really needed an outdoor hardscape area. This could be used as very flexible space, anything from pickleball to outdoor games to any sort of training could take place there. So that's the reason you see that in that area. And then previously on the site that there was a ball field. Within those program meetings, we realized that was not critical for the program of the school currently. However, a multi-use field would be much more applicable and usable. So that's what you're seeing there. And around that, you have a walking loop. I won't call it an actual track, but it is an asphalt paved loop that can, again, be used for PE and even recess, but very, very flexible space and I think usable for many different groups. I think, Chris, what he was mentioning previously was on some of these schemes, you'll note some striations or markings shown in this lawn area of the field. We did initially anticipate we might have some sort of subsurface drainage for that field when we intended there to be irrigation. Currently, there's no irrigation planned on those fields. So if you see those stripes, that was for an older drainage system that will not be installed. And just before we actually, Steve, if you don't mind jumping forward, I think we can move to a little bit of a blow up of the scheme. Yes, this is great. Just in terms of security, there's fencing provided around the southern portion of the field and around the back. It doesn't need to loop the entire area, but we're really just creating a barrier between any sort of athletic activity happening on that field and our sort of parking movements. And again, like Steve noticed, emergency access drive will be gated as well. And this gives you a little bit of a blow up of that outdoor playground space as well up in the top of this image. Outdoor classroom space has also been provided. There's two locations. There's one towards the rear of the school where Steve has his cursor now. New outdoor vegetable garden. Vegetable gardens are currently happening on site. We're taking this moment to revisit that, doing it in a little bit of a different way where there's actually seating next to it too, so we can take full advantage of that space as an outdoor classroom. New outdoor plaza spaces servicing both entries for both the parents and bus drop-offs with outdoor seating, and looking at incorporating shade in all those areas with outdoor trees. And then around the site, you'll see quite a bit of planting. We're really focusing on maintaining some of those existing trees, which you'll see to the page, to the top of the page there. There are existing trees located along the existing parent drop-off. Those will all remain. And then we're just adding on to that with new shade trees being located in the parking lot areas and along the sidewalks and around the entire school. Also focusing on new foundation plantings and increasing some of the restoration plantings in the disturbed areas. And this is specifically located in the one space where we have the new parking lot that is infringing in a buffer zone. So we've been working with Conservation Commission to look at those plantings and making some revisions based on their comments, but that area is proposed to be renovated, new native plantings and species for that space. And then across the site, just amenities, benches, new bike racks, and a really just new overall appearance and a lot of graded added pieces to the school. So there is a bioretention area. I think Steve noted that. That's page right over there. We are increasing the planting in that area. So any disturbed areas around that perimeter will be revegetated with new native habitat. And this is just another blow up of that playground space where you see the PE zone, which is an asphalt hardscape flex space, outdoor classroom with outdoor seating. And then you have your recess area with the basketball hoops, amphitheater seating, and outdoor play. Our electrical engineer is not with us today, but there will be new site lighting around the school in terms of pole lights and safety lighting. To the east of the school, where there's been no modifications, pole lights will stay in place. However, the rest of the parking areas will be receive new pole lights, both double and single fixtures. There was a photometric included within your package, and all those lights will be dark sky compliant with no overflow onto adjacent properties. And again, happy to take any questions, comments now, or we could keep going and take them at the end.
Why don't I open up to the planning board? Are there any, as we go, are there any questions now, or you can ask questions at the end? But if there are any currently, I know I have some, but I was going to save them for the end. But up to you guys.
I'm good.
Save for the end.
All right. Why don't we keep going, and we'll ask any questions we have at the end of the presentation.
Okay. So the next we included were exterior elevations. Dan, I didn't know if you wanted me to. There's a couple sheets that I left in here for you.
Yeah, that's fine. I could speak to these. For the exterior elevations, we are looking to not directly mimic the Hopkins building, which is as many of you have probably seen it. It has a lot of brick patterning and a lot of different colors on it. What Steve is showing right here, or zoomed in on right here, is the gymnasium elevation, which is the south side where the student bus drop-off is. That would be you can kind of see the tiny little letters there on the canopy that would say Hopkins Intermediate School. The gym mass, and then behind it in the background there, the pitched roof of the classroom side of the addition. So if you go down to the addition, which is at last finally up that elevation there. The idea here is to, again, not directly mimic, because we want to have less glazing in the addition. We don't need as much. And one of the things we try to strive for now from a sustainability standpoint is to maximize the daylight and minimize the amount of glass. So that's reflected here. And we're going to pull in some of those brick colors to try to not mimic the building, but create a kind of a harmony with the existing building as best we can. Again, the pitched roof to, again, kind of harken back to the existing, but not create like just a carbon copy, but an addition that kind of, pays homage to it, but has its own identity. Okay, these close-up elevations.
Yeah.
Yep. So
the one before.
Those are no, it doesn't. So the modular, you're seeing that west end elevation modular. That the intention there. Those are the down below, to the over to the right. So that is will be coming over from the Elmwood. Those are currently stationed at the Elmwood. They were designed to look like the modulars at the Hopkins, because the intention was for those modulars to eventually make their way over to Hopkins. So once Elmwood opens, or Charleswood opens, the intention would be to bring those modulars over and snap them onto the end of the classroom addition, and giving 4 more classrooms to the Hopkins building.
So with this, we did. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
So I'll take this part. So as I mentioned, the town has engaged with Commodore Builders to develop logistics plans and serve as the construction manager throughout construction. They've developed a traffic plan that would first and foremost prohibit deliveries during drop-off and pickup times to mitigate traffic. The deliveries the subs would be instructed to drop off at the 85 exit of 495 and come up towards Hopkinton from the south. They would turn in the Hopkins Drive, and rather than pass by the school, they would utilize the loop road that is two-way traffic all the way to the lot on your bottom left there. And then they would communicate with the site to have managed traffic during the one-way portion that is shown in blue there, to ensure that any traffic that is coming around the school is not in conflict with the deliveries. We think that this is an efficient way to get a lot of that construction traffic in and out of the site without having to visit heavily student-frequented areas. The construction schedule is offset from the Charleswood project by 1 year. We would be pending a successful vote, beginning some site improvements at the beginning of July, and that would largely be to create the asphalt that makes up the parking at the top, largely so that it can serve as 2/3 parking as we take over a portion of the site for the construction fence that's shown here, and also so that 1/3 of it can serve as a flat play area that can be managed during the winter with snow removal, so that we can also have a remaining grassed area where the students will be able to utilize that for recess. You go to the next slide. Construction will start in earnest in September, October. They'll mobilize a little bit for the site and obviously create that Jersey barrier and pavement area to extend the parking, but then it will largely remain like this until the end of the school year. This will allow them to make headway building the addition as well as constructing the geothermal wells, and allow them to still operate as a fully occupied school for the entire year. You can see certain modifications we're making at the parking, with the goal that we would never reduce the existing parking that is available on site. If you go to the next slide. As we move into the sort of second phase from the summer of 2025 until February of 2026, this is when we'll be completing the addition, so it'll be ready for occupancy. We'll be developing a lot of the site work that is close to the building, as well as continuing to develop during the summer some of that site work at the entrance and wrapping around the fence that will make up the parking that will become available to staff in February of 2026. In February 2026, we'll get a temporary certificate of occupancy for the addition, and that will allow the current multi-purpose space that's planned as the extra half gym to be utilized as a temporary cafeteria while we do extensive renovations in the current gym and cafeteria that will occur during the school year from February 2026. And if you flip to the next slide. Through completion in August 2026. During this period, while we're doing that interior renovation, we'll also be finishing off the remaining third of the site as outlined by the orange fence here. That will allow us to open for that period of time the entire front parking lot and greatly expand the amount of available parking. And then we'll utilize the summer of 26 to really finish off a lot of those occupied areas while students are out of the building, so that we'll be opening as a 4-5 school in 2026. As I mentioned, we're 1 year removed from the Elmwood project, so the school will actually open without the modular at the end of 2026 or in August of 2026. And it'll operate as a 4-5 as it does today for 1 year. The following year, when Elmwood moves in to the Charleswood School, the modular will become available at the end of that following summer, and separate from the current funding authorization will, if the need is still there, be moving the modular over to the end of the new addition. We included it in this site plan application because we were encouraged by John to submit a full and complete site permit package, but we did want to note that that modular piece is at the tail end and may be done as a separate project.
So with that, we're happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Why don't we have our principal planner give a staff report first, and then we'll come back with questions. I know I have several. So, John, are you prepared to give a staff report?
Yeah, there's through the chair. There's not a ton to report on at this point. We are still looking to get the peer review inspector on. We've outreached to them. We just need some administrative stuff to happen. So they have not had a chance to review at this point. And I don't believe we've received any comments from other departments. Otherwise, it's major site plan due to the gross floor area and the addition of the parking. And it is a stormwater management permit as they are disturbing more than an acre of land. So those are the two permits that would need to be approved and the criteria that would need to be met. And that's pretty much the extent of my comments at this point. But once we get some comments from other departments and from the peer review consultant, I may have more.
John, is it appropriate at this time to just note the waivers that we're requesting for the board?
I don't think it would hurt.
Okay. So we are looking for 3 waivers for the site plan review and 2 waivers for the stormwater management permit. For the site plan review, we are looking for a waiver of administrative fees because it is a town's project. It's a school project. And we are also looking for a waiver from the environmental impact assessment. This is an operating school. It's been operating since the late 90s. We are currently in front of the Conservation Commission, as I previously mentioned, for the notice of intent. So the environmental impacts of the wetlands resource areas that exist behind or to the north of the school are being considered. And again, we are in front of you for a stormwater management permit, so we intend to meet all the requirements and regulations of both the state DEP as well as the town. And then the last is the community and financial impact. Again, this is an operating existing school. The use will continue. We're just expanding the use a little bit. And then as far as the stormwater management permit, again, the administrative fees, we're looking to request a waiver from the board. And then the last one is we are requesting completion surety be waived for this project because it is a school project, a town project. We fully intend to build and construct everything that's being proposed and hopefully approved at some point as shown on the plans. So those are the waivers we're looking for at this time.
Thanks, Steve. We typically, and this is a question for John, we typically go through our review process before voting on any of these waivers, even the administrative fee. That's what we should do here, correct?
Correct.
All right. I'd like to open it up to the board to ask any questions as we have. Matthew, why don't you kick us off? I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, it's more so just for timing. Since this is going in front of town meeting for budgeting, is there any time constraints or anything we need to consider before then, or that's all separate?
Obviously, if they do not need planning board approval to ask for budget to get a budgetary approval, and if it was to fail at town meeting, obviously they would have to come back to the drawing board on what they're going to do next. So our approval doesn't impact the town meeting article. Go ahead, Elise.
Thank you. I just wanted to check, is the amount that's being asked for in town meeting that we're voting on, does that cover everything that you guys proposed in this presentation?
Yes, at this time, we believe that we'll be finalizing that amount. We're currently in an estimating cycle for 60% CDs, and we'll be finalizing that amount in the coming days so that we may amend it potentially down or let it remain the same. But we're currently asking for 48,550,000 at town meeting, and that is the funding for the proposed design as we've presented it.
That does not, if my understanding is correct, that does not include moving the modular classrooms that may happen at the end of the project.
Correct. That currently excludes the modular classroom and the immediately related landscaping that is around it. We obviously wouldn't put plants in against a building that's not in place yet.
Yep.
Thank you.
So just I think everybody just has some general interest because it's a school and schools are obviously super important in the town of Hopkinton and probably every town. So I have some general questions. It sounds like the new addition is going to have a gym or maybe half of a gym. Is that correct?
Do we have an interior plan in the deck, Steve?
We do not. I can probably bring one up if you want to start speaking.
So as part of the programming effort, we used the MSBA guidelines as a rough outline in establishing the number of spaces that needed to be added to accommodate the student growth.
Chris, do you want me to share my plan?
Yeah, if you have it available, Dan.
Yeah, I do.
Great.
Okay, everybody see that?
Nope, not yet.
No.
Yep.
Yes.
You got it?
Better.
So as you can see, to meet the programming needs, we need 3 separate gym spaces. So a typical gymnasium will serve as 2 gym spaces. So we have a multi-purpose room, which is a long, narrow, high ceiling space that would facilitate, games other than basketball. It could be running, it could be tossing a ball back and forth, it could be a transverse wall along the bottom of the space. And so that creates the temporary cafeteria space that would take over the cafeteria during the final construction. We're adding 5 classrooms on each level. So what that does is it adds 10 classrooms as part of the addition itself. As part of this, we are transitioning from a 4-5 to a 5-6 school. So in order to have equity with what the current 6th grades have, we have upgraded certain spaces such as science classrooms to make sure that we're providing for the appropriate curriculum spaces that they currently have in the middle school. We are reconfiguring some of the spaces. Anyone who has been to Hopkins in the last few years knows that it's been sliced and diced quite a bit in order to accommodate the growth in students. There's several interior classrooms. So we're reconfiguring some of those interior areas to provide appropriate special ed spaces and other related spaces so that we can restore the small group rooms that are appropriate for the number of students in the building. We're adding an STE space. And then when you get to the right of the plan, which is the existing gym, we are turning the existing cafeteria into music spaces, and we'll be replacing the existing servery, which is actually quite small, with a servery that's 2.5 to 3 times the size. And that will serve as converting the gym into a new cafetorium.
So one of the things I have boys in the school system, and one of the things that Marathon School, after it was built, one of the places I see all the time is their gymnasium. My boys play basketball, and I think everybody there's lots of youth basketball played in that gym where parents come to watch, and I'm envisioning this facility, this gymnasium being the same, where parents are going to come to watch. And Marathon School didn't allow enough space for really bleachers so people could watch. They set up a row of chairs, and I think it's an opportunity to make sure there's enough space on the sidelines for the hundreds of kids and parents that are part of that whole ecosystem within Hopkinton. And I see the drawing here.
So there's a rendering of that gymnasium. It is slightly bigger than Marathon's because of this, and Elmwood, Charles Woods will be the same. So you can see there is bleachers on both sides. It's actually even a little bit, these lines are a little bit misleading. There is more runoff on the left and right side. So if I go back here, you'll see there are bleachers. Sorry about that. I was trying to zoom in. There's bleachers on the top and bottom. of it. So both sides, kind of a home and away. And there'll be about 300 seats or so, basically matches what's in the existing Hopkins now from a count.
All right. Yeah. I just had one more comment, and then we're getting near our time allotment for this on our agenda, if we're not over already. But the outdoor spaces, I know Parks and Rec and Little League has used the baseball field, baseball / softball field. I know Parks and Rec has used that basketball court in the past for Parks and Rec programming. Has there been discussion with other like Little League or Parks and Rec or these other groups that have used those outdoor facilities? And I guess I'm just seeing the size of the school increase and the size of the outside space decrease just seems to not be in balance.
I would look to the schools to answer the engagement with various groups. We have had to take over some of the cleared lands. We are locked in by wetlands on multiple sides, so it's challenging immediately close to the school to create additional flat playland without deforesting the area that approaches the wetlands. We're sort of landlocked by the existing drainage structures to the north and to the east or the west, and then the wetlands on the east, and then the neighbors to the south. So there is a limited amount of available space. There are trails that allow you to take students from the Hopkins School through to the field that you see on the sort of upper left of the page. And it's also envisioning that you'll have a sidewalk that takes you to the lower corner baseball field there. But with the modifications, the new field is a is it U10 or U12 soccer for size
10.
comparison?
Yeah,
So it's
a U10.
So it's
240
U10
by
for soccer,
170. So it's a little bit larger, but yeah.
but it's
240
likely
feet by 170.
it likely becomes too small to continue Little League use.
Okay.
Right. Yep. And maybe Tim could probably jump in, but just quickly, again, during those programming meetings, it was kind of interesting to understand what the actual use was by the school. And, based on our notes, it appears that you could have up to 4 classrooms, almost 100 kids out for PE. So hence the reason a larger field space like this that could be broken down into multiple pieces could be, really useful for them, more so in this case than a ball field.
Yeah, I can probably help you with some of the physical education numbers. When right now we have 16 fifth grade and 14 fourth grade classrooms at Hopkins. And they actually end up meeting 2 times a week. So right now, each one of the physical education teachers is able to accommodate 30 classrooms because they each teach 6 periods a day, 5 days a week. So they are maxed out right now is what I'm getting at, because we've got the 30 classrooms, they meet twice, and there are 2 PE teachers, 30 apiece. So when we built this gymnasium, and you can see that there's also a multi-use space in there, we had to do that because the moment you get to the 31st classroom in that building, you need another physical education space. So when we look at the exterior of the building and we think about fields out there, there will come a time when we need to absolutely have 3 classrooms out there, if not 4 at a time. And that's really just to accommodate kids and give them physical education as they receive it now. So it doesn't add any additional physical education time on. It's just all dictated by enrollment growth numbers.
Oh, so I do have one last question. That as I see this project starting potentially in this summer and going to August of 2026, and building a project to 802 students capacity. The current numbers are above projections that were made several years ago. So I assume there's going to be new projections of where the grades are in terms of enrollment. are going to be at the day that the school opens. And I'm curious what those numbers are. The day the school opens, are we going to be at 750 kids? 720? What is the projected number?
So we do have those projections, but I think we would have to take a moment to look them up.
All right, I'll table that for now, but on our agenda, oh, if you have it right here.
We do have it. I think it's 747.
Yeah.
So it's going from basically 696 in this year to 729 next year to 747.
Yeah, currently, I think the number Tim Person gave you was 688. So we're hovering right around 690 right now.
Yep. You're ahead. You're already ahead of the numbers that were used to develop the.
It just seems the projected ask doesn't match the real need. But maybe that's not for the planning board to weigh in on. Why don't let me just continue the next thing on our agenda, because it seems we're gonna well surpass 800 students within not long after this edition. So typically we do a site walk. What does the planning board think about a proposed site walk for this site? I know I've seen it many times, but it might be worthwhile to kind of get a sense of where the school boundaries will go to and other things like that, where the parking will go to.
I think it's a good idea.
So typically we try to schedule these on a Saturday morning. Is there somebody from the applicant that could meet us to kind of answer some of those general questions, like this is kind of the footprint envelope of the school, this is the where the parking would go, so we just see it in
does the planning board look to have it physically staked?
No,
or is relative?
It doesn't need to be physically staked. If it is, great. If it's not, that's okay too.
No, just clarifying so that we don't disappoint you or waste your time.
Yep.
I think it would depend on what day it is, but we can arrange for someone.
Yeah, like I said, we typically try to do these on Saturday. So I know I'm not available. I don't necessarily need every member doesn't necessarily need to be there, and it's hard to get all members all to be available on one date and time. But how does this Saturday work for anyone?
I can make it.
I could do it, but I'd like to wait for you, Rob.
It doesn't seem like we're in a rush. We haven't had any peer review or anything. It seems like
it
could be postponed.
What about the 4th?
More people.
May 4th.
It might be nice to have the site walk after the town meeting, if possible.
Mm-hmm. It's possible.
It would be easier for us to arrange to have the right people there if we had a little more leeway.
So that would be the 11th.
Yeah, basically any Saturday morning, any Saturday morning in May, I think would work in general. Some people obviously won't be available every Saturday, but we typically try to shoot for 8:30 or 9 in the morning.
If you want to pick the 11th, we can pick the 11th and we can arrange to have someone there.
Let's shoot for the 11th. How about 9 a.m.?
And we won't need access to the inside of the building, correct?
No.
This is site plan review.
Yep.
Chris, I can make myself available for that date as well.
Okay. All right, you can set that date. I don't know if you require a motion to set that date, but
No, we don't. That's one of the things we don't need to vote on.
every planning board's different.
But at this point, I think we'd like to continue the public hearing for 90. Let me get the 90. What's the address?
I think they said 90 and 104.
Yep. Continue the public hearing. I'd like to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing for 90 and 104 Hayden Row Street.
Time did you say, Rob? 8:30?
9 a.m.
9 a.m.?
Do we need a meeting to which we're going to continue it, a date? Or just indefinitely?
I think we would look to schedule it for the planned 5/13 meeting if possible. If that will give you adequate time between now, we can authorize the peer review within 2 days. If that'll give you adequate time to review it and have comments for the 5/13 meeting.
I move that we continue the meeting till 5:13.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Matthew, how do you vote?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Elise?
Yes.
And did I miss anybody? I don't have, and Rob is a yes. And I think we also need to, do we need to do anything else, John? I think that's it.
The decision for the stormwater management permit is required by May 26th, so we still have time. So we don't need to continue that, but that's about it.
Okay.
John, could I ask you just a general question? Do we need to complete the planning board process to apply for building permit or just to begin construction?
You don't have to complete the planning board process to apply for a building permit. They probably won't issue it.
Okay. That's helpful.
All right, I think I'd like to, if there's no more questions on this, I think I'd like to hand it over to Gary to continue the meeting, our chair.
All right. Thanks, Rob. And I think just one more item for us, and that would be the meeting minutes from April 1st, 2024. Any comments, edits, suggestions? Besides, excellent job, Lori. Thank you.
I was just second, excellent job, especially catching up on some of the earlier continued meetings and refreshing my memory. So thank you.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion to accept our meeting minutes from April 1st, 2024.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Elise?
Elise, yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes. Secondly, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob, yes.
Jane?
Jane, yes.
Elise?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Gary is a yes as well. So thank you all. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.